Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the greatest NZ live political podcast in the world, The Working Group. Hosted by beloved left-wing broadcaster Comrade Bomber Bradbury, with the best political panel in New Zealand media, reviewing the week, setting the agenda, avoiding defamation. The Working Group is brought to you by Gravity Credit Management. When the weight of capitalism is becoming the event horizon of an imploding black hole, call 0800 Gravity, and our team will get blood out of a stone. That's 0800 Gravity. This is The Working Group.
This is the Taxpayers Union 2023 election debate series coming to you live from the Puketapa Hotel in the mighty Napier, hosted by the Working Group. I said that would happen, didn't I say that would happen? Hosted by the Working Group, New Zealand's best political weekly podcast that isn't funded by New Zealand On Air. I am your host for this evening, the editor of the Daily Blog, Martin Bradbury, and joining me tonight is my podcast permanent panelist, the 132nd most important libertarian columnist at Stuff, Damien Grant. We are streaming live tonight on the Daily Blog, on the Taxpayers Union, Facebook and YouTube, and simulcast across the nation on Juice TV, Freeview 200. Brothers and sisters, fellow New Zealanders, comrades and citizens, thank you for tuning in to this most important of civic duties, which is to vote. In an age of disinformation, misinformation and apathy, our democracy needs engaged citizens like never before. Let's ensure tonight that we are passionate in our debate and righteous in our argument, because there are only 100 democracies on earth and we are blessed to be one of them. Tonight, we will debate the ideas while respecting the individual, because no matter how you vote, we are all citizens and we all shake hands after the arguing. So before we begin, a toast, fellow citizens, to our democracy, and long may we debate in it. To democracy! Right, let's get into the buggers. Tonight, we will probe each candidate on issues that are confronting this electorate and the nation. We aren't just interested in their promises to Napier, we are interested in how they will provide leadership on the big issues confronting New Zealand right now. Issue 1, the East Coast recovery. Issue 2, climate change. Issue 3, crime. And issue 4 tonight, the economy and cost of living crisis. At the end of the debate, I will ask where we are going as a country, and each candidate will get 2 minutes to answer where they think the country is going and how voting for them and their party will impact that direction. I have to warn all 4 candidates now, I have an allergic reaction to party spin lines, and if I hear vacant answers to important questions, I shall not hesitate to be sarcastic. You won't like me when I'm sarcastic. After I have quizzed you on each of these topics, Damien will challenge your answers and you will get a 60-second rebuttal to him. This election matters as New Zealand teeters on economic hard times and social cohesion breakdown. Before we introduce our candidates and invite them to give us their opening statements, I'd like to invite Callum Purvis from the Taxpayers Union to come to the stage and present us with the unique courier polling for Napier. Callum?
Thank you very much, Martin. We haven't said anything yet. The Taxpayers Union is proud to be hosting these debates, as Martin said, without any money from New Zealand On Air or the Public Journalism Interest and Public Interest Journalism Fund. We have been sponsored very kindly by our friends at Gravity Credit Management, so we thank them for their support. For those of you who don't know, the Taxpayers Union is a pressure group fighting for lower taxes, less waste and more accountability. We have 200,000 subscribed supporters across New Zealand, so if you're not one already, you're more than welcome to join the fight. So it's my duty to present the polling results. We have exclusive Taxpayers Union courier polling for the Napier Electorate. So we'll get into that now. This poll was conducted on Sunday the 20th of August for adults in the Napier Electorate. We had 400 respondents who agreed to participate on landline or a mobile phone out of a random sample of 5,000 phone numbers, and the results have been weighted. So the first question we asked was around country direction. So that's where we asked whether people think that New Zealand is going in the right direction or the wrong direction, which helps us get a good understanding of how people are feeling about politics and their life in general. So on that, 60% of the respondents said that they thought the country was headed in the wrong direction, compared to just 21% who thought that we were headed in the right direction and 18% who were unsure, which led to a net country direction of minus 39%, which is pretty in line with our national polling on the same issue. We also asked people what their most important local issue was as they were looking to make up their minds in advance of the election. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the top issue here was cyclone recovery on 21%, followed by law and order on 19%. A number of other responses that we got cumulatively were 13%, then roading on 10%, housing on 9%, 8% for health, the cost of living 8%, the economy 5%, 3 voters 3%, local council 2%, and education 1%. So that gives us a good understanding of what the issues are that people are passionate about this evening, and also some of these will be covered by Martin and Damien in the debate. We also asked about people's support for speed reductions on State Highway 2 and State Highway 5, a topical issue, perhaps closer than you might think. 41% were supportive of the speed reductions, 48% were against, with 11% in unsure. We also asked about the government's response to Cyclone Gabrielle in Hawke's Bay. 12% thought it was very poor, 18% thought it was poor, 29% thought it was average, 15% good, and 15% very good, 10% unsure. So broadly the same for good, if you add them up, 30%, and poor, 30% as well, with about 30% in the middle, so pretty evenly split on that issue. Now into the meat of things, the party vote. So we asked people if there were an election to be held on the day before we polled, so the Saturday before we polled, how would they have voted? So for all voters, that was 25% said they would vote for the National Party. We had 20% saying that they would vote for the Labour Party. 12% said they would vote for the ACT Party, 5% for New Zealand First. We had 3% for the Greens, 3% for Te Pāti Māori. Others were on 1%. We had New Conservative on 1%, Top on 1%, and 23% undecided, which is quite a lot. It's much higher than our national undecided figure of 7%. So there's a lot of people who have yet to make up their minds in the Napier electorate, and 5% of voters were refused to answer that question. Now, once we take out the unsure and the refused, then that scales up what our most likely result if the election were held on this Saturday past. That's 35% for National, 27% for Labour, 17% for ACT, 7% for the New Zealand First, which would be enough if replicated nationally to get into Parliament, 4% for the Greens, 4% for Te Pāti Māori, and then others in slightly less than that. So that's quite a significant swing, 16-point swing from Labour to National on these numbers. We also looked at the retention, whether parties were able to keep their voters from 2020. National, 70% of voters still planning to vote for National. 9% have gone to ACT, and then there's 13% who are undecided. Labour, slightly more concerning, I suppose, for Labour voters. Only 39% of people who voted Labour in 2020 are definitely committed to doing so again. However, I would draw your attention to the rather large undecided there. Over a third of Labour voters, getting over 50% in the last election nationally, are not entirely comfortable voting Labour right now, but have not yet committed to vote for another party. So there's still a lot of voters in that pool up for grabs. The Greens there, very small sample, so I wouldn't read too much into that. An ACT, best for retaining their voters. Some have gone to National, some undecided. Then we asked about name recognition for the Labour and National candidates. So for the Labour candidate, Mark Hutchinson, 38% were able to correctly identify him, compared to 53% for Katie Nimon. 56% couldn't identify Mark Hutchinson, and 47% for Katie Nimon. 6% incorrectly identified the Labour candidate, perhaps still thinking of the previous or the current MP. That's a lot better, actually, for both candidates than we had in our Hamilton West poll, where 40% could identify the National candidate and only 30% the Labour candidate. So that's good for both candidates, actually. Then on the electorate vote, which is the one we're here to primarily talk about this evening, 37% voting for Katie Nimon on the all votes, 28% for Labour, 4% for New Zealand First, 3% for Te Pāti Māori, despite the fact they don't have a candidate. We did prompt for the 5 candidates who have declared. That was Labour, Democracy NZ, ACT, National, and New Zealand First. But some people are obviously very committed. 2% for Democracy New Zealand, 1% for ACT, 1% for the New Conservatives, also not declared a candidate. Then others undecided. Again, 18% of voters in the electorate vote have not decided, and 6% just didn't want to tell us again. So we take out all of those unsures and undecideds, and that gets us our final result for the electorate poll, which is 48% for Katie Nimon, 37% for Mark Hutchinson, which is a lead of 11 points, 5% for Laurie Turnbull of New Zealand First, 4% again for Te Pāti Māori, who don't have a candidate, 2% for Democracy New Zealand for Martin Langford, 1% for the ACT candidate, and then a couple of others there. The last point I would leave you with is that given that result and given the large number of undecideds, while there has been a rather large swing to the National Party since the last election, it is still a very competitive race. Thank you.
Fascinating. Let us begin tonight's event by introducing our invited candidates to this evening's live stream simulcast TV debate. From the New Zealand First Party, Laurie Turnbull. From the National Party, Katie Nimon. From the Labour Party, Mark Hutchinson. And from the ACT Party, Rob Douglas. Welcome to you all. Welcome to you all. Let's begin tonight with an opening 2 minutes from each of you on your vision for the East Coast and New Zealand. Laurie Turnbull, your 2-minute vision for the East Coast and New Zealand, please.
Oh, I think firstly it's about developing it.
That's it.
Oh, sorry. It's about developing it because all the provinces have really been put behind and over the years, so that's why the Provincial Growth Fund has been used to grow the East Coast, especially around Wairoa and Napier. We've sort of put a lot of money into the local areas. I guess it's about developing the whole area, like getting some people, getting some products out into the market. We know we've got a big primary industry here. We just got to grow it. We've got to get boost the economy around Napier area by getting more infrastructure in place. We need more rail. We need more good roading to get our products to market. So I guess it's about just building the whole area, building the economy of the area, and getting the right stuff out of Hawke's Bay, because we've got such a massive amount of potential in Hawke's Bay, and it just seems to have been lost over the years with different governments taking, different aspects of what we should be doing. So I guess to me it's just about growing Hawke's Bay, especially Wairoa, so just growing us as an area.
Thank you very much, Laurie Turnbull. Katie Nimon, your 2-minute vision for the East Coast of New Zealand, please, starts now.
Good, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name's Katie Nimon. I'm the National Party candidate for Napier. And for me, look, it's really important that we get the 5 most important things right. We need to reduce the cost of living. We need to grow incomes for everybody. We need to restore law and order. We need to build infrastructure for the future. And we need to provide world-class health and education. And all these things are intrinsically linked. You look at the hospital, we're understaffed with nurses. We were able to get 15 nurses apply for a particular job in one department. None of them could get a house to live in. So it's really important for us that not only are we growing our economy, we're growing Hawke's Bay. It's a prosperous place to live, but you can actually move here. I want to see a boom for Hawke's Bay, for Napier, for northern Hawke's Bay, as I tend to call the electorate, because of course let's not forget it goes all the way up to Tukituki, up the ranges, all the way up to Matawai, down to Muriwai, just south of Gisborne. This whole area has so much potential. As long as we don't keep selling it off into forestry, but we've got so much potential in our region, and we can grow that and new industries and allowing industries to develop, and that's what we want to see, because at the moment it takes 8 years to consent a wind farm, for example, 2 years to build. Anywhere else in the world, it's 1 year to consent, 2 years to build. Why would you invest in New Zealand? Why would you bring your business to Hawke's Bay? So we want to see that grow, because if we're investing in infrastructure, look at the Waikato Expressway as an example, a good road of national significance that National started. There's a vet in Hamilton that can do 2 extra jobs a day, still get home to her family at the same time. She is more productive, she is bringing more money into the country, and she is bringing more money for herself, and that's what I want to see for Hawke's Bay and for New Zealand.
Thank you, Katie. Hutchinson, your 2-minute vision for the East Coast of New Zealand, please.
Hi, I'm Mark Hutchinson. I'm from here, so I know Napier very well. My family has very deep roots here. My vision is that I want Hawke's Bay, and Napier in particular, to be a place where our kids, normally I'm too loud, our kids and grandkids will want to live here, work here, will thrive here, and there'll be jobs and opportunities for them. So my family background is one where the little help that the state can give through the generations with the warm, dry house, with the education, and those sorts of things is really important. So it's all very well to talk about the issues that are a problem now, but the difference between Labour and National is that we have plans to fund it. So it's disingenuous for National to talk about funding nurses when Labour has increased salaries for nurses by 60% since 2017. That will stem the flow of nurses elsewhere. We've massively increased the amount of nurses and doctors in training and psychologists. Many of these will not be finished in training yet. So my vision for Napier is that we continue the investment that we need in the social and physical infrastructure that we need. National has talked about a 4-lane highway to Hastings twice before and not funded it. The national roads of significance were funded through the national maintenance budget, and that led to the pothole problem that we have now. The potholes will be fixed by taking money from the safety budget. So when you look at Labour's vision is about investing in this country to build the social and physical infrastructure that it needs. And I think that what talent wants, what our young people want, is they want a place where they can have a warm, dry home near a decent school with accessible, good public services like hospitals. And we used to have a hospital in Napier, and it was shut.
Time.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to be rough on that time, I am. We've got a lot to get through. Rob Douglas, your 2-minute vision for the East Coast and New Zealand, please, sir.
I have a vision. Is it going? Can you hear me?
No, maybe pass it.
Sorry.
Damien gave you the
I have a vision for a safe, prosperous and a united New Zealand. One where victims' rights trump those of criminals. Where our streets are safe and criminals know that there are consequences for their actions. Where all people in Hawke's Bay and in New Zealand have access to an affordable,
high-quality home made possible because of the ACT Party's reforms or replacement of the RMA, cutting of red tape, and proper competition for building supplies which we can provide for. With our homeless in homes, our motels and hotels can once again welcome tourists back to Hawke's Bay. I see Hawke's Bay thriving on the back of a well-educated, skilled workforce. With our tourism, with our rural horticultural sectors attracting international businesses to Hawke's Bay to add value to our rural produce and create high-quality, well-paying jobs here in the local economy. I see a future where everybody gets a high-quality education that they all deserve and will see us well into the future. We need to bring back chartered schools. We need to tackle our truancy crisis and make the public service accountable for delivery. It is no point categorising us all based on who our ancestry is. We want to go forward together, united by the Treaty of Waitangi. And I'd like to see a new hospital built here in Hawke's Bay made possible by the private funding that the ACT Party will support the introduction of.
Time.
If you share this vision, please give your party vote to ACT.
Thank you, candidates. Let's start with issue one and the enormous recovery job from numerous extreme weather events that have wrecked normalcy and demanded a level of resilience only East Coasters can endeavour. We have all been shocked at the damage Napier and the entire East Coast has faced with Cyclone Hale and Gabriel, with the gnawing fear that what has happened here will be the blueprint for the rest of the country and our climate changing landscape. 30% of voters thought the government response was good or very good. 30% thought, 29% thought it was average, while 30% thought it was poor, very poor, and 21% of the electorate rated the recovery as their most important local issue that will influence their vote. Laurie Turnbull, what do you think the government have gotten right, and what have they gotten wrong in the cyclone recovery?
Well, sorry guys, it was a bit of a poor start from me. I wasn't quite prepared for a lot of stuff that's been spoken about. But no, the main thing is, and I've just have to, because I've never done this before, I just have to read. I'm sorry about that, because I'm not sort of like a political person. I'm more of a rugby league person. But I'll just state some comments from what I have learnt from what's happening in Hawke's Bay. Before any party makes political promises to you in their campaign about how they're going to pick up our province alongside the rest of New Zealand, please ask what they have budgeted to fix up Hawke's Bay that was so badly damaged by the cyclone. New Zealand First estimates it's going to be between $8 and $14 billion to fix up our beautiful area. So with that figure in mind, and all the other promises that have been made, just make sure in 12 years' time we don't want to be like Christchurch. This place has to be fixed. We don't want another Christchurch. Where's the $14 billion COVID recovery fund gone to? If that was invested, job done. We could be back with that money that they've found from somewhere. We need to make decisions about helping the flood victims in their lives and to sort these buyouts quickly. I know there's been some funding from the government, but it's just not enough to get these things sorted. The government needs to push the insurance companies who are delaying payment. Same old story. Once you make a claim, good luck. Lucky Taradale, Green Meadows and other parts of Napier were saved from worse outcome by the investment of $12.8 million by the Provincial Growth Fund. We must support the increase in the stock bank at Tutaikuri. We need a lot more of this kind of investment to make sure that we are resilient and flood-proof ourselves in the future.
Follow-up question, Laurie. The ministerial inquiry led by Hekia Parata was scathing in its criticism of the pine forest industry. What did you agree with? What did you disagree with?
Well, pine forest, there's too much of them. They're taking away all our arable land. And apparently the pine actually is cyanide and it's poisoning the land. So we should be looking at how we're using our land and less pine trees and more productive farmland.
Damien, thank you. Damien Grant, your questions based on Laurie's answers, please.
come out of the pine thing.
He needs a microphone.
Why not?
No, you hold on to that one.
Is that not working?
He should have his own one.
I've got one. I'm mic'd up now.
Oh, you're mic'd
I'm
up.
good- I'm
Screw
good
it.
to
Okay.
go.
Go for it.
Stop stealing my time. Laurie,
Yes.
I just want to ask the question. Do you believe that the floodings and the events that occurred, were they a function of climate change, or do you think that they were a function of something else?
You got 60 seconds, Laurie. Go for it.
No, climate change. There's a lot of negative rhetoric coming out about climate change. I believe that it needs to be looked at. There was worse floods in the 30s that have not been recorded in the Napier area. There's obviously things changing, so you need to make a pragmatic look at climate and just don't jump the gun and do things that people are saying need to be done. So just study the climate and do things that need to be done to fix the areas that are going to be affected.
Thank you, Laurie. Kate Nimon, what do you think the government have gotten right and what have they gotten wrong in the cyclone recovery, please?
Look, so I think what they've gotten wrong, and I'll start with this right now, is saying that you're going to have a local delivery but not preparing your locals to deliver. And we saw that in the immediate response. We saw the locals being geared up to do the best they could for their community, and then they were undermined. And then also seeing local government do their very best to try and support the buyout process, the recovery, and being drip-fed funding. Not being able to plan for it. And now, we're over 6 months afterwards, and, there are still people that are absolutely uncertain about the buyout. What does that mean? What's it going to look like? What are they left with? What do they have to manage? So, look, I think that the level of uncertainty, the limbo that a lot of people are still in, I think that's just not good enough. But I will say, coming to the party with funding, we all backed that, getting some emergency law change to make sure we can do the work that we currently wouldn't or otherwise wouldn't be able to do. National backed that. We'll continue to back that. And we want to give people the reassurance that whatever decisions are made, whatever buyouts are done, we're not going to go and unravel them. We want to support that and make sure people feel at ease that process won't be backtracked. But there are a lot of people out there that aren't being listened to, and we want to make sure they know that when we come into government, we will be able to listen to them, because if they've got an option, we can talk about it. There are things to do.
Follow-up question. The ministerial inquiry led by Hekia highlighted the need for local community groups to have the resources to be self-sustainable during moments of crisis. What did you agree with? What did you disagree with?
Yeah, bingo, I'd say to that, because I saw it in the immediate aftermath. The communities that had facilities, they had the equipment, they had everything they needed, they were amazing. They were self-sufficient. Yes, you got supplies in, but they were prepared for days. The communities that didn't were completely in desperate need. And the isolation we saw, by way of infrastructure, by way of services, whatever it might have been, we had communities that were waiting for someone to bring them a life-saving, or a life-saving device, whatever it might have been. So, I think that's really important for us to prepare people.
Damien Grant, your questions based on Katie's answers?
So one of the issues that was a challenge in some of the restructuring was getting on was the inability to get stuff done, and a lot of that hold-up was the Resource Management Act. The Resource Management Act for 9 long years under the previous government, there was an absolute failure to do anything about it. We now at least have a reform to the Resource Management Act, which is going to make it catastrophically worse. Sorry, Mark. What confidence can we have that National will actually do something about the Resource Management Act when you didn't last time you had power?
Yep. Well, look, So, I say that, every government has different priorities. They have different things to deal with. At the moment, we have seen how much worse it's gotten, how unworkable it is. I think taking it from 800 pages to 1,300 pages only complicates it more. And as we all know, the people that have said that will benefit the most are lawyers, because it is that confusing. So, look, we have said that we will make the best of what it is until we have time to be able to get in there and make it what it needs to be. And we said last election that it really needs to be 3 different acts, because honestly they all overlap each other. At the moment, if you're dealing with, let's say, Napier City Council and Hawke's Bay Regional Council, or Hastings District Council and Hawke's Bay Regional Council, 2 different consenting processes. Then you've got, building compliance issues, too many different parts.
Do you have the legislation good to go? You've had 6 years. Do you have the legislation good to go?
No.
Good answer.
Thank you, Katie. Mark Hutchinson, what do you think of the government has gotten right and what have they gotten wrong in the cyclone recovery?
I think the first thing to acknowledge is that people have been through a lot. I've visited a lot of communities recently. I've seen people in Wairoa and a lot of small communities, and it's been an awful event. So I think the thing that the government did right was they got alongside councils, and councils were really clear that they didn't want a Sarah-type approach where the government came in and dictated responses. Councils wanted a locally led recovery, and I think what the government did well is they got behind them and they funded them what they needed, and that has been a rolling maul of initiatives, and it's less drip-fed than the scale of the problems emerge and grow. So to date, there's been $2 billion put into the cyclone recovery. There's been over $500 million put aside for the buyouts. And there's been large amounts of money put aside also for the flood protection. So as one example, Wairoa will get $70 million to put the flood protection in place that it needs. So I think what the government's done is they've been there as a partner, and when I talk to people in places like the Regional Council, they've said they've been there alongside us to make sure we get the funds we need. I think what government possibly got wrong was underestimating the capability of local councils to coordinate and deliver. And we need to learn a lot from this experience, because I think that these sorts of events, unfortunately, are going to get more frequent.
Follow-up question. Again, the ministerial inquiry found that the political choices made over decades by land use by previous governments have had devastating long-term negative impacts on the people and the lands of the East Coast. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with that?
You're speaking specifically about pine? Yeah, so I think the first thing to note is that 50% of our pine forests are owned by overseas investment funds. They're not even really owned by foresters. If you look at the list of people that own them, it's a hedge fund in New York and a private equity firm in Sydney. So we never should have lost control of something that was that important. I was around when Bowler happened, and when Bowler happened, the quick decision was taken that if we planted a lot of pine forests, it would stop the eroding land, and farmers, a lot of farmers' land became unproductive, and so they got paid out for their land, and pine got put on it. I think that's one thing. The second thing is that, especially given that there are a lot of overseas owners of this property, is that there needs to be rules about the slash, right? We need to turn the slash into something productive. So you have Air New Zealand crying out for biofuel, and we have an East Coast. You saw on the news last night the logs shooting across the road. We need to put an economic value on the slash. We need to have something like a biofuels plant in the East Coast, and we need to turn it into something useful.
Damien, thank you. Damien Grant, your question is based on Mark's answers.
When were these pine forests ended up being owned by overseas funds?
Over decades.
Right, so because we've had...
Under Labor,
And national.
the Kinley Forest was sold under Labor.
So Labor has tightened the Overseas Investment Act. This government has made it harder to buy a range of assets from overseas.
So, yeah, because we currently have the Overseas Investment Act, and the Overseas Investment Act makes it illegal without the permission of the Overseas Investment Office to invest. So, given that, and you guys have been in charge for the last 6 years, you've approved a lot of these acquisitions. So, if the current government and the people who are in charge of the Overseas Investment Office are allowing foreigners to buy these pine forests, not that I think that's a bad thing, what's going to change going forward? Particularly as if you are in government next time, you may want to leave New Zealand first, and maybe that's the answer.
That was a very long-winded question, Damien. What would you like me to answer?
Overseas. All right, well, let's just stay with the Overseas Investment Act. Given that this government has overseen a considerable expansion and investment, and you're opposed to that, what's going to happen to stop more overseas investments?
I don't
in
agree.
pine forests?
I think this government's tightened the Overseas Investment Act. It's possibly not as tight as it needs to be, and that's something that probably needs to be looked at.
Okay.
Robert Douglas, what do you think the government have gotten right, and what have they gotten wrong in the cyclone recovery, please, sir?
Well, look, we've had absolutely no consistency of leadership, and for various components of the process, the response has just been too slow, and people have been left with lingering uncertainty and unable to move their lives forward. The reality is that the ACT Party want to introduce 15 policies. We had a policy within 17 days of the cyclone with 15 policy responses, which would create a special economic zone around Hawke's Bay and Gisborne to allow us to get back to business. I'm a property valuer, and as a property valuer, I go and value the streets of Napier and Hastings, and on a regular basis I see these shops and the buildings there. They're built in 1931, 32, 33, 34, like just years after the earthquake. That's how quick we were able to rebuild then. The type of economic zone that the ACT Party would create around Hawke's Bay would allow us to rebuild in that sort of environment that we faced then. So that's the kind of thing that I would like to see going forward.
Follow-up question. The ministerial inquiry said, and I quote, the mismatch of land use with land type has had dire impacts. What do you agree with? What do you disagree?
You're talking forestry kind of use there. Look, maybe. Certainly, I think there's an element there where the party responsible for the slash and forestry situation needs to take some responsibility for it. There's potentially a situation where we could take a bond for that type of activity to make sure that they are able to take responsibility for any damage that they cause.
Damien Grant.
A special economic zone, exactly where are you proposing to do it geographically, and how would the laws between those inside the zone and outside the zone work?
Well, look, I guess this was partly a response to the fact that the current policy settings nationwide are too restrictive. They would be, we would try and make it as flexible as possible, because to be quite frank, the policies we want to implement are actually the policies we want to implement nationwide. They would massively free up the Resource Management Act through a replacement of it, which would improve our productivity as a country.
But physically where? Where are you going to put this?
We would look at areas that are affected, so wherever they are. Wherever the cyclone damages, I don't see why we can't allow it to be repaired under an economic zone.
Thank you, Rob. Let's move on to issue 2 and the cause of these catastrophic climate events, and that is climate change caused by human pollution. It is impossible to discuss these climate events without having a plan to adapt from the extremes we now face. In 1980, the time between billion-dollar climate destruction events was 3 months. It's now 18 days. There is a point where the next destructive weather event strikes before you can rebuild from the last one. Catastrophic climate change is interrupting the agricultural calendar around the world and exacerbating global poverty and generating huge costs to the economy. Katie, emissions reductions on agriculture were supposed to occur in 2003, yet corporate farming with their political muscle have ensured nothing has happened in 20 years. And National are promising a further 5 years where corporate farmers don't have to do anything. That's 25 years of doing nothing. Can National be taken seriously on the climate?
Look, yes, absolutely it can, because we're not doing nothing. We're just not putting agriculture into the emissions trading scheme. There are other ways that we can reduce emissions. And one of the things that we're proposing is enhancing biotech, because we have Kiwis, and this is the thing, right? Kiwis have developed a grass that when the cows eat it, it reduces the amount of methane, yet we cannot grow it in New Zealand because we have really strict biotech laws. We are prepared to talk and work with farmers to make sure that that kind of thing can be done, because we can reduce our emissions in other ways without punishing farmers.
Well, let's have a talk about that. Follow-up question. Transport is our next biggest emitter, yet National are focused on slashing public transport investment and spending it all on fucking roads again. Can National be taken seriously?
There goes our
on the
PG
climate?
rating.
You don't want to do anything about agriculture, and you don't want to do anything about transport. What are you going to do?
Oh, he's a road hater in the building. Look, I did just say that we're going to do a lot about agriculture emissions, but there's more than one way to skin the cat. And secondly, the same thing with roads. You know, EVs drive on roads too, I will have you know. And the other thing as well is that we are more productive when we have more efficient roads. And that is something that we need to remember, because if we can get around faster, we're not stuck in traffic idling at the intersection of Links Road and Pakawai Road getting to work in the morning. We are moving faster through our region.
So you'll be supporting a lack of less immigration so that we don't have our roads gridlocked?
You don't have to accept the premise of his
He always
question.
has to accept the premise.
No,
of it.
absolutely not.
Damien Grant, your questions, please.
Let's talk about the emission trading scheme.
Yep.
Why is National reluctant to extend the emission trading scheme to agriculture? What's the hold up there?
Because look, I think it just punishes farmers. They are the biggest contributor to our economy and growth potential as well. And the minute we do that, there are farmers out there that are faced with either selling their farms into forestry or part of their farms into forestry or reducing their herd. Now, there are the odd few that are able to be clever about what they do and get some gains in one way or the other, but not everybody is. And if we continue to punish farmers, our succession plan goes through the floor, and then another farm goes into forestry. And if you look at Wairoa, the rate that their farms are selling into forestry, the whole district will be pine forest in 30 years' time. We cannot do that too long.
Thank you, Katie. Mark Hutchinson. Helen Clark first attempted an emissions target in 2003, but National drove a tractor up Parliament steps. How do we get beyond the climate denial and focus on solutions?
How do we get National beyond climate denial and focus on solutions? Well, I think there was a time when the National Party was more sensible and moderate, and Todd Muller made some good progress on this. There have Simon Ridges even made more productive contributions. The National Party at the moment is saying that they're not climate deniers, but they're behaving exactly like climate deniers. We are entering into modern trade agreements. Now, you cannot believe in climate change, but you have to believe in trade. We are a trading nation. We are now entering into big trade agreements where we must meet the same targets as other people in the world. Wake up, people. In Europe, they are not making petrol and diesel cars after 2030. We need to electrify. Our country is abundant in renewable resources, and we can do it. This government is investing in things like hydrogen technology. This government brought in the clean car discount. That has actually created a massive bump in the number of clean cars that are now being driven. This is important. This enabled organisations like New Zealand Post to redo the economics on their van fleet. And remember, it's not middle class welfare, because actually poorer people buy second-hand cars. And if you don't have new electric vehicles, you don't have second-hand ones. So I would agree on the point around the genetic technology. So my cousin's husband is one of the scientists that works on those. We do need to look at that. We need to look at technology as well, but we must have emissions caps.
Follow-up question, FUQ. Billionaire forest owners who don't live here and who don't seem to care about the damage their slash causes, what needs to change? Because we do actually need forests to offset our carbon.
I was speaking to somebody that's done a PhD in this recently, right? And we need to have a range of different kinds of planting for the right situation. So it could be that in waterways you might want to go for natives. There are certain kinds of transition forestry. I can see some experts in the room on forestry, so I better be careful here. You might need certain kinds of transition forests that grow well under Pinus radiata. And actually, there has been a recent tweak in the rules around pine forests and plantations and emissions, and that should peg back the amount of high quality land that's going into forestry. Remember that this government brought in acts of parliament to stop high quality arable land being turned into lifestyle blocks, which is what was happening to a lot of it.
Damien Grant, your questions, please.
I want to come back to the emissions trading scheme. So the emissions trading scheme, as it's currently constituted, excludes agriculture, but that puts a price on carbon, or CO2 to be more precise. Why not simply allow the emissions trading scheme to force the most inefficient, high-use producers of CO2 to exit the market at their own time and at their own price? Because what this government is doing with the Clean Car Initiative, because it is middle-class welfare, the amount of emissions you get from an $8,000 car subsidy is trivial compared to what you would get by another 20 or 30 cents on the carbon price. So why is this government so focused on micromanaging rather than allowing the emissions trading scheme to do what we know it could do if it was allowed to run through unfettered?
Okay, I'm not an expert on that, but what I would say is that we've had a cost of living crisis, right? And so a huge input cost to the economy has been fossil fuel. And while and thanks Vladimir for making that a lot worse. I think the ultimate goal, I think you're right. I think ultimately that you should let the market for carbon do the job. I agree with you, but I think this government has been trying to soften the blow of the price of fossil fuel on inflation and the cost that is,
giving me $8,000 off a Tesla isn't going to do that.
So, Damien, you're smarter than that. You know that the economics of
that's
nudge theory.
a big assumption, Mark.
Nobody buys that.
So, Damien, when you want to make a big change and people are all behaving the same way, so driving petrol cars, often you need something which is called a nudge to change behaviour and to change buying patterns. And by taxing the higher fuel-emitting cars and using that money, funded policy, to encourage the uptake of EVs, it's been a very successful policy. There's been a massive increase in EVs.
Thank you, Mark. Rob Douglas, if National wants... Thank you. Round of applause for Mark there. Rob Douglas, if National wants to strip out any climate change regulation, ACT wants to burn them. ACT's argument is New Zealand produces a tiny amount of pollution and it won't make a difference globally, so why bother? But doesn't that ignore the vast adaptation New Zealand needs to embark upon to be ready for more climate change?
Look, you're putting words in our mouth and they're not accurate. Look, we do accept that there is climate change. But what we need to do is recognise what we can do about it and what we can't do about it. And look, the reality is that we are only a small producer of global emissions. We also have the most productive, lowest emissions farmers in the world. No other country in the world has put farming into the ETS. So why would we cripple our farmers, take a whole lot of them out of production, send that production offshore to higher emitting countries and increase global emissions? So this would be Labour and the Greens simultaneously damaging the economy and the environment. It's just nuts.
Well, follow-up question, and let's get the words correct, shall we, Rob? Back in 2016, ACT claimed, and I quote the direct words, New Zealand is not warming. There is no warming trend since 1970, and the slight warming trend since 1950 is not statistically significant. If it were to warm moderately, we would likely benefit in terms of land-based production, human health, and reduced heating bills. ACT was wrong about climate change back in 2016. Why are you right now?
Well, we're agreeing with your position that actually there is climate change. That's an awful long time ago. Look, ACT don't deny it.
You should see the stuff. You should see the stuff. Seriously, you should see the stuff on his blog. That is far worse than any ACT policy from 2016. Cripes almighty! I'm not too sure you're in a position to be critical, Mr. Bradbury.
Is that a question or a statement?
I think that was just a statement. Again, I want to come back to the emissions trading scheme. So, would ACT introduce agriculture into the emissions trading scheme? And if not, how do you plan on dealing with our methane emissions? That's certainly a big issue for some voters.
Oh, look, no, we wouldn't bring it into the emissions trading scheme. Look, the reality is, as I said earlier, our farmers are the most productive in the world. When the rest of the world comes up with a great scientific solution for this, then, we're happy to look at it when they bring it in. We will match the climate price of our 5 biggest trading partners. So, it's not a case of we're shirking our responsibility. We accept there's a responsibility. We need to play our part, and that's exactly what we'd do.
Laurie, New Zealand First has had some interesting views on science recently. with a candidate selected who believes nano robots were in the COVID vaccine. Where is New Zealand First on climate change now? Is it real or is it a socialist hoax?
Well, obviously, I don't know what other candidates stand for. I'm just here to, give my impression of things about New Zealand First. And on climate, as recently we've stopped using coal. We actually imported 2 million tonnes of brown coal from Indonesia. 2 million tonnes of brown coal, and we have coal in our own country. And this coal, I'm assuming, was used to make electricity, and I'm assuming that electricity, some of it was used to power up electric vehicles. So how do you stand on climate when the government now is letting coal come into this country and they've stopped the mining in this country, and just to produce electricity for EVs? It just doesn't make sense.
Follow-up question. There's more carbon dioxide in our atmosphere than at any other time in human history. We're accelerating down the path to exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, and statistics in the Northern Hemisphere are breaking daily with land temperatures, ocean temperatures, mass flooding and unprecedented forest fires. Is New Zealand First serious about climate change? Because Winston seems to be more interested in putting toilet cops in public bathrooms to stop people of different genders using toilets. Is New Zealand First serious about the climate?
100%. But of course, there's a lot of rhetoric coming from overseas, pushing it down our throats that the world is, we're gonna die. I think, what's it, Greta Thunberg? She said last year the world would end. So I don't know. But just to say something, in 1960, it was said there'll be no oil in 10 years. In 1970, it said there'd be another ice age in 10 years. Acid rain would destroy the country. That was in 1980. In 1990, the ozone layer would be gone in 10 years. In 2000, ice caps would be gone in 10 years. None of this has happened. The only thing has been more taxes.
Damien Grant?
Laurie, according to your LinkedIn, you spent some time in the Middle East and Papua New Guinea. Is that right?
I did indeed.
So just maybe give us a quick 1-minute snapshot of what you observed there, particularly in respect to the climate. I mean, what are they doing there? Do they care? Are they just drilling the oil? I mean, I realise you were doing mostly HR, but from that background, does that give you a different perspective maybe?
Well, in Papua New Guinea, I was an HR consultant in the mining industry, and of course, it's all about making money for the country, so they don't really have a big focus on anything to do with climate change. It's just getting money to help their country grow and feed their people. And in the Middle East, well, Dubai, what can I say? It's all about money. They don't really worry much about the climate. It's all about making money, and yeah, just it's all about money in those countries.
Is that a good model?
Not really. You can look at other, as I said.
Laurie, you let me down.
No, it's not a good model.
It's a great model. Drill, baby, drill. Come on.
Mine, baby, mine. Well, the thing is, if that's the only resource you've got, especially in Papua New Guinea, there's not a lot there. So if you've got oil and gas and coal, let's say take it out of the ground and get the country going.
Good man.
Thank you, Laurie. Let's move on to issue 3 and the sudden, shocking spike in youth crime and organised crime post-COVID. Media coverage of youth crime has exploded. Images of ram raids and organised crime violence has shocked, frightened and angered the country, with a 25% increase in theft and a 19% increase in acts intended to cause injury. Alongside this youth crime wave, we have organised crime turf wars as 501 syndicates use stand over domestic gangs for the billion-dollar meth trade. Napier voters said law and order is the second most important local issue that would impact their vote this election. Mark Hutchinson, the 501s flooding New Zealand are using sophisticated criminal tactics, uber violence and South American cartel links, bringing in purer and cheaper meth. This level of organised crime demands a serious response that can differentiate the difference between the mongrel mob and the Comancheros. What is Labour doing to ensure cartels don't fuel gang wars?
It's a very specific question. What I can say is that over the last year there's been 40,000 charges against people in gangs for criminal activities. That's a record. Having 1,800 extra police is a big part of... Sorry? camps.
Let him answer.
So we have 1,800 more police. So what you'll find is that National and ACT talk tough on crime, and when they're in power, there's a sinking lid on the resources for the police. So the number of police per population dropped from 1 for every 480 people to 1 for every 550. That is a lot less police. Not even in 2016 and 17, not even all crime was getting recorded. I'm not suggesting that crime is not a problem at the moment. I'm just saying that Labour is looking at the things that you can do to tackle crime right around the world post the pandemic. Kids that have been sort of alienated, lost touch with the school system, ended up what we call NEET, not an employment, education and training, have become a problem, and they've become a target for gangs. So what have we done with the 501 issue? We did some diplomacy. We got the 501 issue sorted out. That didn't happen under National. We are investing in rehabilitation programs. We are investing in moving kids away from ending up in a life of crime. So if you understand crime, you understand that today's 10 and 15-year-olds, the biggest impact on whether or not they end up in crime is poverty, deprivation and alienation between 0 and 5. So the teenagers that we have now, you have to look back in time. So there's been a lot of work done on this overseas, and what we're doing is we're following the evidence. Boot camps don't work. I was a child psychologist in the 1990s. They'd already been discredited. You just get fit, angry, alienated young people who end up being recidivist criminals. You have to choke off the number of people that end up in a life of crime. So I can go on about the evidence in Auckland.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. Follow-up question. ACT want ankle bracelets on 11-year-olds. National wants them on 10-year-olds, while Labour wants them on 12-year-olds. Isn't this fight over which age to put a fucking ankle bracelet on children part of the problem?
Can we stop with the swear words, please? I mean, we're going to keep beeping them.
I have. This is me very unswearing.
I agree. I mean, if an 11 or 12-year-old is committing a ram raid, you have to have a look at a wraparound intervention. There's something wrong in the family. Unfortunately, taking kids out of homes hasn't worked in the past, right? So you've seen what's happened with SIPs. When I was a psychologist, I ran a tamariki. It's not as simple as just taking the child out of the family, right? Because sometimes we make the problem worse. It is complicated. One of the issues in this country has been that there has been a depression over the years of the national governments and the money spent on the public services. The population of New Zealand raised by 800,000 people under John Quay, not a penny more, went into nurses, doctors, psychologists, family psychologists. We have invested heavily. We have invested heavily in things that will make a difference. No, there has. There are three times as many psychologists in training. Guess what? They take 6 to 7 years to train. There is a massive increase in the number of nurses. There are 8,000 nurses in training this year. That's the most we've ever trained. Some of those then get retrained to be mental health nurses.
Damien,
Psychiatrists take about
Mark?
10 years to train. So the money is being invested, but it takes time.
I think that the fact that it takes 6 years is just a failure of occupational licensing. But
well, now that we have a single health system, we are able to
have
work
two
with,
health systems.
We have
two health systems. Come on, mate. Get with the program.
We don't have two health systems.
Sorry, Mark.
We have
okay,
one.
All right.
We have one. That's nonsense.
Okay.
That is nonsense.
Okay, all right.
Damien. We have one health system.
Mark, it might be nonsense, but it was a great line. Now,
at least I got you to admit it.
It was nonsense, let's be clear.
All right. You said we need to look back in time in talking about youth crime, and you are 100% right. So you are 100% right. And one of the reasons why we have this catastrophic failure in our youth today with ram raids and just spiralling youth crime, I don't actually think it is the ridiculous policy of getting the prison population down, which is the one target this government has achieved. But you look at the catastrophic failure of attendance in schools. Now, your current Prime Minister was a Minister of Education, and during his tenure, there has been a
global
shift.
pandemic.
There has been, no, you cannot blame.
Lockdowns.
You cannot. That is a dog ate my homework, sir. We have seen, and that decline began before the lockdowns, and you know it. What is this government going to do to address, if you get back into office,
What are you going to do to address the truancy rate? Because I look at that, and there's a cohort after cohort of lost children. It's a real problem for this country. What's your party's solution?
So what
to
we
that?
don't need to do is cut tax for the wealthiest New Zealanders, so there's less money
That's
for
not the
education.
answer.
No, so what we are
Answer the
doing,
question.
Tax is the
what
answer.
we are doing is we are increasing what we pay our teachers, so that our schools are better staffed. We're increasing investments in special education. We are increasing investment right across the health and education system. You can't help those young people if you don't have child social workers. They've had massive pay increases due to the pay equity legislation. I'm extremely proud of the work that this government has done to start building the public services, but it's going to take a lot longer than 6 years with a pandemic thrown in the middle of it to sort it out.
Thank you, Mark.
You've got 2.5 months.
Thank you, Mark. Rob Douglas, ACT wants to dump the gun registry, which the Police Association is highly critical of, while re-implementing 3 strikes, while pouring $1 billion into our prisons. Won't solving crime by locking everyone up cause deeper social problems?
Look, the reality is this government is soft on crime. They have reduced the prison population by 30% and caused crime to skyrocket. Let me give you a couple of statistics. Acts intended to cause injury up 42% under this government. Serious assaults up 121% up under this government. 465% increase in ram raids. We've seen gang numbers up 84%. None of this stuff needed to happen. The reason why we want to put people in prison is because they've committed crimes. If they're in prison, they're not out on the streets committing crimes. We will reintroduce 3 strikes. We will also introduce a 3-strike system for burglary, and we will also, like Mark mentioned that they were helping rehabilitation, but 90% of prisoners last year, ACT Uncovered, received absolutely no rehabilitation whatsoever.
And you know why that is? Because National passed a policy that said the prisoners have to admit their guilt before they actually were able to get any of the rehabilitation. So this whole game of wiping it in their face one time just to get a little bit more.
Just to point out,
dump that?
Look, have you not noticed that I'm not at National, and also Labor has been in power for 6 years. They have some authority to do something about it. So look, the ACT Party would actually make rehabilitation a condition for early parole.
So they would have to admit their guilt or not? You're actually going to change the law. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not sure our policy on that.
Oh, because you don't know. Okay, follow-up question. ACT wants more youth detention centres, but we saw recently with the Orangatamariki rooftop protest, those kids were up there because staff were arranging fight clubs between the teenagers. Staff were given a mere 2 weeks training to work with these kids. How will your building of more detention centres fix the woeful staffing issues?
Well, we actually believe that we would separate the youth under the justice system from Orangatamariki.
So it would be a youth
So
prison.
hold on, say that again.
Yeah, there'd be
Explain that policy.
youth justice would be under the correction system.
Okay, youth prison. Damien, your questions based on Rob's answers, please.
Okay, I'm struggling a bit with that, but I want to come back to, because I beat up on Mark a bit, but if you have a look, if you have a look at the people committing the crimes, I do think it's a little bit disingenuous to claim that the drop is in the prison master, because those people getting out are not typically those committing the ram raids. There's a different problem happening there. But practically speaking, what is ACT's policy on dealing with these 12 and 13 and 14-year-olds? How are you going to unpick this problem? I accept that you didn't create it, but you're likely to be the people who, with your friends in National, are going to have to deal with it. How are you going to deal with a 12-year-old who, for whatever reason, is committed to an antisocial lifestyle?
Yeah, look, well, for a start, we do actually need to get on top of the truancy crisis, and we will put a national focus on that. We will make sure that every school reports their truancy numbers and their attendant numbers every single day by 9:30 every morning, and we will publish that data to create a national focus on it. That's one thing we'll do, and then we're going to focus in on crime with a staged approach, where we're not going straight to ankle bracelets or anything like that, but we will manage those children based on the seriousness of the offence.
But how are you going to do that with schools? Because your policy includes a real push on partnership or charter schools. That's giving schools more independence. At the same time, you're saying we want 9:30 reporting. That's a bit of a conflict.
Yeah, great point. Well, look, as an example, where we had chartered schools in the past, the chartered schools, just like any other business, only get paid when their clients turn up. So they actually had, down in Christchurch, one of the Crusaders on part of their staff team, and they'd go round and round up these kids that didn't turn up every morning. And attendance at chartered schools has been absolutely fantastic. It's just a shame Labor scrapped them.
Thank you, Rob. Laurie, your leader, Winston Peters, called for a misuse of the Terrorism Suppression Act to designate all gangs as domestic terrorists so that paramilitary police can suspend their civil liberties and shoot them. Is gerrymandering the terrorism suppression law so that the state can go full-blown romper-stomper on its own citizens really the solution to crime?
Well, there's a lot of issues out there, but it's worked in Western Australia and it's worked in Queensland. You need to make sure, look, gangs, mate, I was a prison officer. I've been a corrections officer, and these guys are running riot in this country. They're getting guys getting a bracelet on for attacking an old woman in her house. They're getting the punishment is nothing. You really have to look, and I've seen guys in prison who will look you in the eye and they're proud they've killed somebody.
Follow-up question: as far as New Zealand First are concerned, what should happen to youth who ram raid?
Oh, what can you do with them? You just got to take them off the streets and stop putting them back on the streets every 5 minutes. They got to have some punishment. It's just not working. Obviously, you're up 600%. You got to put a stake in the ground and say, look, this has to stop. What can we do? And just come up with something. Come up with a solution, because there's no solution to it. It's just getting worse.
Your questions, please.
I did notice you're a former corrections officer. I did double check the timeline, Laurie, to see we've encountered each other before, but apparently not.
I know, I've seen you. I've seen you.
Damien was in prison. For those who don't know.
But not at the same time that Laurie was a corrections officer. Maybe, Laurie, we could combine both those New Zealand First policies. What would you think about using the Provincial Growth Fund to build a new massive prison down here in the Napier Electorate? I mean, that could really tick both boxes, couldn't it?
Well, I'll tell you what, the population, when we had in Hawke's Bay Regional Prison, we had 720 prisoners. Under this government, it's down to 500. So we dropped the prison population by 25% and crime's gone up 30%. So something's not right.
Thank you, Laurie. Kate, aggravated robberies of commercial premises doubled from 2015 to 2017 from 599 to 1,170. Why didn't the national government of the day solve crime then? And what are you promising to do to solve crime now?
Look, I think the moral of the story is you're never going to have no crime. So look, let's just get that one out of the way. What we're going to do to solve crime, I think there's multiple parts to it, but National's policies, we've got to go hard on the gangs. Because at the moment in Hawke's Bay, 2.5 to 1, the gang members outweigh our cops. That is outrageous, and they know it. And the most aspirational organisation in this country are the gangs. The kids love the idea of having a Harley, a Range Rover, money, being respected, whatever. Whereas we knock people down at the knees if they want to get ahead, and then they go over to Australia. We might be training more nurses, but they're all going over to Aussie. But the point is, we have got to crack down on the gangs because they are running riot. They know that they have got full reign. And so we've got to put these policies in place. So banning gang pictures in public, stopping them congregating, going hard, having standing warrants that you can search them no matter where they are, when they're doing what they're doing, you can go in and search them for illegal firearms. You have got to do that. But number two is you've got to have consequences. You can't just charge them and then send them back into the public. They have got to have consequences. And so number one for us in the justice system, you have to limit the amount of discounting that can be done, because people go in for serious crime, they come out with absolutely nothing. There are retailers that I have talked to at length who went through the court process with people that have ram-raided their building, $400 each. That's all that they got. It was not worth that owner to come out of his business for 3 days to go through that process.
Damien, your question?
Define a gang.
Yeah. Right, so look, I think what we're talking about is the gangs with illegal criminal activity, right? And so, you know, Labor will say that, oh, there's already something in place saying that they've got... There's already something in place saying that, you know, it's an aggravating factor to be a member of a criminal activity, organised crime. It doesn't necessarily mean that when you're a gang member and you commit a crime, it's organised. So that's what we're saying. Being a member of a gang as an aggravating factor is quite different.
Define a gang. You
Yeah.
are
No,
saying,
I did just say that, didn't I?
No, you said belong to some sort of criminal organisation.
Yep.
Well, I could point to a political party where somebody has committed a crime. Does that mean the entire political party is a criminal gang? It is not. It is not a trivial. It is not. It is not a trivial.
It's not a
point.
criminal
And
organisation.
Mary, that wasn't a dig at you. Can we? So, but what you were saying, I want to be really clear what you were saying. You are saying that the state is going to say that patch, that artwork, that design, wearing that in public is a crime. So if you turn around and say, okay, all right, well, supporting, Manly, you're wearing Manly colours, you designate that as a crime. You roll your eyes at me, but how are you going to turn around and say, we, the state, are saying if you wear that particular arrangement of colours is a crime, you need to define what a gang is.
Yep, so I'm saying patch. No, I'm saying patch, right? Because we can't start defining colours, what colours you can and can't wear in public.
That's exactly what you're doing.
That's the point. That's the
a
point,
patch,
Katie.
the insignia? The insignia?
You'll define a gang, mate, when they hit you.
No, look, I think it is that simple. It is that simple that we identify the gangs that are illegal criminal activity coming out of them. We know their patches. We know what the problem is.
Let's move on into issue 4, the economy and the cost of living crisis. Post-COVID build back, New Zealand has been plunged into a cost of living crisis created by the urgent need to underwrite the economy during a once-in-a-century pandemic, exacerbated by an explosion of geopolitical frictions and global supply chain meltdowns that are literally importing inflation into the West. These machinations are cold comfort when week after week we feel the highest inflation rates for 30 years biting our pockets at the duopoly supermarkets or the petrol oligopoly. Every time you fill up your car or go to the supermarket, you feel mugged. Napier voters said the economy and cost of living crisis were their third most important local issue that could influence their vote this election. Rob, your leader, David Seymour, wants to amputate the Ministry of Youth Affairs, the Ministry of Māori Affairs, the Ministry of Women's Affairs, the Ministry of Ethnic Affairs, and blow up the Ministry of Pacific Peoples, on top of slashing thousands of jobs in public services, arguing that the government's wasteful spending is how you combat a cost of living crisis. After you've amputated the state, how will slashing public services help the economy and society?
Yeah, look, quite right. We do want to cut an enormous amount of waste. There is just excessive waste. Government debt is now 200% increased on where it was when Labor came in. We need to get on control of this stuff because we need to get our society productive again. The way we're going to do that is by slashing spending, wasteful spending, without delivering any cuts to frontline services. This can deliver tax cuts down to 17.5% on the first $70,000 and 28% thereafter. And that is in our fully costed alternative budget, the only party with one. That delivers $2,300 of savings to the average earner with one child on $70,000.
Follow-up question. Your uncle and founder of ACT, Roger Douglas, recently blasted ACT and argued that it was now just a party for the rich. Isn't Uncle Roger right? An ACT is just a party for the rich. Don't the massive $1 million donations from the wealthiest Kiwis prove that point as a cost of living crisis for ACT expensive truffles?
Oh, look, I totally don't accept that. That is one point he is wrong on.
That would make an interesting difference.
No, look, I didn't join the party because it's the party for the rich. I'm not the rich. I believe that the way to bring people forward and bring people up is by giving them a job, giving them an opportunity, giving them an education. And that's exactly what the ACT Party is all about. We're about giving people opportunities, getting the government out of their lives and giving them a chance to make the best of themselves and be rewarded for their own hard work.
Damien Grant, your question, please.
Why was ACT's policy so weak in milk toast? I mean, the government department you left off, you didn't. The Productivity Commission is still there. Shame on you, sir. The Ministry of Education, you could have thrown that onto the bonfire. Why? I mean, is ACT a libertarian party, or are you merely a milk toast version of National? As you've gone in the polls, have you gone soft?
Oh, look, no, we're not soft. We're about real change, and that's exactly why people need to vote for ACT, because we will hold National to account and we will deliver real change.
You hold National to account. You're not holding National to account. You should be there at the top table. You see, you're chickening out already, Rob.
Look, we absolutely will be, and if as long as the National Party is going to come to the party, we will deliver massive
Laurie,
change, and we will be leading it.
Laurie, Reserve Bank Governor Adrian Orr is ratcheting up the OCR to levels many Kiwis haven't seen in decades as he intends to crash the economy into a recession so as to save the economy. Would New Zealand First stand with Adrian Orr or demand he is sacked?
There's a lot of different answers to that question. I would say look at what he's doing, but no, we don't agree with him.
Follow-up question. Winston seems very focused on banning bilingual signs, supporting anti-vaxxers, and making sure toilets are used by people whose gender aligns with the toilet sign. Are these culture war issues really what voters are truly concerned about? What will New Zealand First do for the economy?
Well, I think about the gender thing is quite disturbing. To have a male walk into a female toilet where there's young girls in there, to me, is just not acceptable. And Winston is the only one who stood up and said this. To have women sports with women only, the world's just gone into some crazy woke ideology. So yeah, that's the one I'll answer.
Thank you.
That's the one I'll answer.
Damien, your questions, please, or would you just like to leave it?
No, Laurie, I'm just interested. Do you have a view on the Reserve Bank? I mean, do you think that the current model that we have, which is an independent Reserve Bank separate from the Minister of Finance or the Treasury, as Winston once was, do you think we should keep that model, or do you think we should move to a model which I think what Winston has indicated, where the central bank is under direct ministerial control?
Is the model working now?
That's a good point. I would say the model is...
There you go. So that's my answer.
The model is not working.
That's my answer.
I don't believe Adrian Orr is independent.
That's my answer.
Katie, National has claimed government spending is the cause of inflation and have argued cutting wasteful spending will lower that inflation. How is it a win for citizens during a cost of living crisis to then have to pay for the services you cut?
No, well, we're not suggesting that. We're suggesting bringing money from the back office to the front office. I mean, everybody that I talk to on the street says that they have seen overwhelmingly more money being spent on things that are not getting us results. And that is what we are talking about. We need to see the money come from the back office to the front office. We don't need more bureaucrats, we need more nurses. We don't need more bureaucrats, we need more teachers. We don't need more bureaucrats, we need more doctors. And this is the point we are saying. So talking about the fact that we're going to cut taxes and cut services, that is not true. We are going to bring the money from the back office to the front office. There are 15,000 consultants or bureaucrats, whatever you want to call them, in Wellington. We are not seeing better outcomes in the community. That is the difference.
Damien Grant, your question.
Okay, that's all lovely, but when you drill down on it, though, there is when you push National for the actual specific
policies. What are you going to do? So you're talking about cutting 14,000 additional public servants, and that's great. But what are you actually going to do in terms of increasing the productivity of the health system, increasing the productivity of the education system? How are you going to get some form of market discipline or accountability into those sectors? Because at the moment they appear to be deeply dysfunctional. And again, that didn't really happen under the last National government. They ran the welfare state better than Labor, but they didn't really make any transformational changes. What's going to change?
So do you know what I'm going to say? Chris Luxon is what makes a difference. He is an outcomes-focused prioritising businessman. I tell you now, honestly, if you listen to the things that he is talking about, he is relentless on outcomes. He is relentless on outcomes. Because what we need in our healthcare system, in our education system, are outcomes. Because what we are doing at the moment is we're putting money into stuff that doesn't get us outcomes, and we're not actually that worried about it. We're not reporting on it. We need to see targets and we need to meet them, and that is how you ensure it gets done.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Katie. Mark, Labor won't bring in a wealth tax or a capital gains tax or a ghost house tax or a financial transaction tax or a sugar tax. What is the point of bread and butter politics if no one can afford the bread or butter?
That's a very interesting question. So I think what you'll see is that the Labor Party will have a much more progressive tax policy going into the election than the National. So some of the things that have been discussed there, more nurses and better pay for them is not wasteful spending. Getting through a 1 in 100-year pandemic with the best excess death rates in the world, it's not a waste of spending. If you look at the budgets closely, which I've had a look at, the big areas of spending are health, education, and national superannuation. So a lot of the talking about where the wasteful spending is, it's just not accurate. So the whole point of the health reform, as an example, has been to get middle managers out. The whole point of the Tukituki reform has been to get middle managers out. So these things are not easy. So Labor is leaning into difficult generational change in water, in health, in education. They're not things that happen overnight. But the aim of the reforms is to have a simple system so that you've got one set of standards for health across the country, so you don't need bureaucrats and 20 different health boards.
Thank you, candidates. We must now wrap with our final word on the direction of New Zealand. In the polling, 60% of Napier voters believe the country is moving in the wrong direction. We have 24,717 people on the social housing wait list. We spend $1 million a day keeping beneficiaries in motels. In term 4 of last year, only 50.6% of students were regularly attending class. 12% of children in New Zealand live in low-income households. 55% of Kiwis are struggling financially. Home ownership is at its lowest rate in 70 years. We are facing the worst inflation in 30 years, and there are 100,000 Kiwis who are homeless. Candidates, you have 1 minute each to answer where the country is going and how voting for you and your party will impact that direction. From the New Zealand First Party, Laurie Turnbull, your time starts.
Thank you. In 2017, the Labour New Zealand First Coalition was a moderate government that sought in 9 years to neglect the public service of the National Party. Since 2020, the pendulum has swung towards a woke extremism of virus delivery. The next generation, the next government needs a partner that will not sell us out to overseas interests, that with a can-do attitude, we will ensure we will build, manufacture, invest and govern New Zealand in the best economic interest. New Zealand First is a party born of ordinary New Zealanders. We understand the economic challenges facing New Zealand, and we don't have extremist policies on either side of the divide. That has never worked in the history of our country. We support the freedom of speech. That means anybody has a chance to stand up and talk and say what they need, not to be humbled by all the rest of them. We support New Zealanders to disagree with any political fundamental parties.
Time. Thank you, Laurie. Katie, your time starts now.
Look, I knock on a lot of doors, and every single person I talk to thinks that the country is not going in the right direction. And that is absolutely, they can see that whether it's crime, whether it's the economy, whether it's cyclone recovery, things aren't where they should be. National is the party that's going to get things back on track. We're going to do that by reducing the cost of living, by raising incomes for all, by building infrastructure for the future, by restoring law and order, and by providing world-class health and education. We cannot compete with the rest of the world when we don't have people regularly attending school. That is our future workforce in 15 years' time, and these kids are not performing at any kind of benchmark. They are under 50% in every single subject. And that is what is going to get us into the future. And we do not have a productive economy, we do not have a productive population, and we have to turn all of these things around, and they are all interlinked.
Thank you, Katie. From the Labour Party, Mark Hutchinson, your time starts now.
We have a very clear choice, and what you've just heard there is National's magical thinking. They argue that they can make everything better and cut tax at the same time. That is just not going to work. What you'll get if you vote for National ACT is you'll get $8 billion in their first 3 years handed into the hands of the wealthiest New Zealanders. Landlords will get a break, people that are on the top income tax break will get a break, and what will happen then is, and everybody knows, even in their hearts, National Party voters know that health and education always does worse when National's in power. So we're fixing a broken system. The track that we're on is from picking up a health system where there was literally poo in the walls in Auckland hospitals because health boards had been saddled with millions of dollars of debt because they weren't being funded for the work they needed to do. And that was replicated across the whole public service. So
thank you, Mark. And ACT Party, Rob Douglas. Your final word, please.
We are getting left behind the rest of the Western world. Under John Quay, New Zealand's median wage fell from $11,000 to $17,000 behind Australia. Under Labour, it's gone from $17,000 to $23,000 behind Australia. We can't keep doing what we're doing and expecting different results. We have to track a new course. There is a better way, and ACT has those policies. We will work with National, but New Zealand needs a strong voice from ACT to ensure that we do get real change. Prison reduction targets aren't the solution. Reducing crime is the solution. Taxing everything, subsidising everything is not the solution to our cost of living crisis. We actually need to increase productivity by cutting red tape, lowering taxes and improving our standard of living so that we can afford a world-class health and education system.
Time.
All right. Just before we hand over to Martin for his Marxist diatribe to carry on the end, as always does, the working group, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the fact that we have 4 really impressive individuals here who are competing for your vote. Laurie has had a really impressive career from corrections to working overseas. Laurie, and I salute you and thank you for coming back and for keeping the country safe from people like me, so it's good. Katie, you've been involved with the family business with an incredible legacy, and very sad to see it sold after the Department of Education. Shocking. So that's why they need to be smashed as well. Just to be clear. But you ran before, running again, and an outstanding candidate. Mark, also an exceptional. You've got a business, Divergent. I had a look, seemed to be very well. You're doing on some excellent boards. Standing for Parliament is a big commitment and well done. And Rob, you're your own man. Don't listen to him. He's an idiot. You're out there. You're in a profession. You're a valuer. You're providing real value as a valuer. I think that we are very lucky that people of this calibre are standing for office.
Round of applause. Comrades, that's the show. Thank you for tuning into this most important of civic duties, which is to vote. As I said at the beginning, in an age of disinformation, misinformation and apathy, our democracy needs engaged citizens like never before. Our thanks to the candidates, Gravity Credit Management, the Daily Blog, the Working Group, the Taxpayers Union, Courier Polling, Slipstream Media and Juice TV Freeview 200 for bringing this evening's debate to the live streamed masses. We will see you 7 p.m. next Tuesday for our next live stream debate in Ilam, where we will see if Raf Manji's top has a chance to destabilise the entire political establishment this election. From the palatial Tukituki Hotel in the mighty Napier. Kia ora and ka pai, New Zealand!
Political podcast, The Working Group. Not 1 minute of this show was funded by New Zealand On Air. Nope, no creamy public broadcasting money for us. That was The Working Group.